In the annals of criminal history, the names of some serial killers are etched into our collective consciousness. But what about those whose stories remain in the shadows, the lesser-known predators who left a trail of terror in their wake? Join us on a journey into the minds of 3 lesser-known but equally deadly serial killers whose stories deserve to be told. From their gruesome acts to the investigations that finally brought them to justice, prepare to be shocked, disturbed, and fascinated by the dark tales of these elusive murderers. Wesley Allen Dodd was an American serial killer who committed a series of heinous crimes in the 1980s. His story is a chilling and disturbing one. Dodd's criminal activities came to light in the late 1980s, and he was convicted of sexually assaulting and murdering 3 young boys in the states of Washington and Oregon. His first known victim was Cole Neer, an 11-year-old boy he abducted and killed in 1989. In 1990, Dodd was apprehended after he attempted to abduct 2 young brothers, ages 10 and 11, in a park in Vancouver, Washington. The boys managed to escape, and their father reported the incident to the police. This led to Dodd's arrest, and during the subsequent investigation, he confessed to the murders of 3 children, including Cole Neer, as well as multiple other counts of child molestation. Dodd was convicted and sentenced to death in Washington for his crimes. His trial brought significant public attention, not only due to the horrifying nature of his acts, but also because he seemed unrepentant and even described his sadistic urges and desires in great detail. While on death row, Dodd corresponded with true crime author Ann Rule, who wrote a book about his life and crimes titled The End of the Dream. He claimed that he wanted to help prevent other people from committing the same acts he had. However, his true motivations remained a subject of debate. In January 1993, Wesley Allen Dodd was executed by hanging in Washington state. It was the first legal hanging in the United States since 1965, and it was chosen by Dodd himself as the method of his execution. His decision to choose hanging was seen by some as a way to further sensationalize his death. Dodd's case remains a disturbing chapter in the annals of American serial killers, and it has been the subject of considerable public interest and debate about the death penalty, criminal psychology, and the treatment of individuals with severe sexual and violent tendencies. Randy Stephen Kraft, also known as the Scorecard Killer or the Freeway Killer, is an American serial killer who was active in Southern California during the 1970s and 1980s. His story is one of the most notorious serial killer cases in the region. Kraft's criminal activities first came to the attention of law enforcement in May 1983, when he was arrested by the California Highway Patrol for drunk driving. Inside his car, officers discovered a dead Marine, Terry Lee Gambrell, who had been bound, tortured, and strangled. This discovery led to an investigation into Kraft's background, and it revealed a gruesome pattern of murder and sexual assault that stretched back to the mid-1970s. Kraft's modus operandi involved luring young men, mostly hitchhikers or individuals he met at bars, into his vehicle. He would then sexually assault and torture them before strangling them to death. It is believed that Kraft may have murdered as many as 67 young men, although he was convicted of 16 murders. The Scorecard Killer nickname comes from a coded list found in Kraft's possession, which contained cryptic references to his victims. This list, along with other evidence, helped prosecutors build their case against him. In 1988, Randy Stephen Kraft was convicted of 16 counts of murder, making it one of the longest and most expensive criminal trials in California history at the time. He was sentenced to death for his crimes. While in prison, Kraft continued to maintain his innocence and claimed that he had been wrongly convicted. Kraft's case has been the subject of intense public fascination and has raised questions about the criminal justice system, the handling of serial killers, and the complexities of investigating and prosecuting such cases. He remains on death row in California, awaiting his execution. Arthur Shawcross was an American serial killer who terrorized the communities of Rochester, New York during the late 1980s. His story is a disturbing one of violence and brutality. Shawcross's criminal history dates back to his early adulthood. He was convicted of manslaughter in 1972 after killing 2 children, Jack Blake and Karen Ann Hill, in a particularly gruesome manner. He was sentenced to 25 years in prison, but was released on parole in 1987 after serving just 15 years of his sentence. After his release, Shawcross moved to Rochester, New York, where he began a new reign of terror. Between 1988 and 1990, he went on a killing spree, targeting women and girls, primarily prostitutes and sex workers. He would lure his victims to secluded areas, strangle or bludgeon them to death, and then often engage in acts of necrophilia. The police launched an investigation into the disappearances and murders of several women, and suspicions eventually led them to Arthur Shawcross. In January 1990, he was arrested and subsequently confessed to the murders of 11 women. He provided graphic details of the killings and desecration of the victims' bodies. In November 1990, Shawcross went to trial and was convicted of 10 counts of second-degree murder. He was sentenced to 250 years to life in prison for his crimes. Shawcross's case generated significant public interest and led to debates about the parole system and whether he should have been released after serving only 15 years for his earlier manslaughter convictions. His crimes also raised questions about the treatment of violent offenders with a history of extreme violence. Arthur Shawcross died in prison on November 10, 2008, while serving his sentence. His crimes remain a disturbing chapter in the history of serial killers in the United States.